Welcome to the Lazy CEO Podcast, where Jim Schleckser, author of Great CEOs Are Lazy and founder of the CEO Project, features compelling experts and topics for CEOs of mid to large-size companies. Now, let's get started with the show.
Welcome, everybody, to another Lazy CEO podcast. My name is Jim Schleckser. I am your host, and I'm the founder of the CEO Project. Well, today we've got a really interesting guest. I think most people in our audience travel. Some of us travel a ton. And to say travel is no fun would probably be an understatement. And honestly, I think it's gotten a lot less fun over the last couple of years in terms of reliability and kind of the hassle and as they try to cut costs and make money. But there may be an antidote. And our guest, Eli Facenda of Freedom Travel Systems, is going to help us understand how can we gain access to lounges, get sort of first-class treatment, first-class upgrades, five-star hotels. Let's say VIP travel wherever we go. And I suspect it's without writing gigantic checks as well. He's going to help us with that because anybody can do that. He's got a little magic sauce he's going to talk to us about. He comes from this honestly. He is essentially a full-time nomad traveling all over the world. So he has tremendous personal experience in this area and obviously runs a company in the space. So Eli, welcome.
Jim, thank you so much for having me on. I just got back into Austin the other day from a trip myself. And so excited to dive in here and share some insights, tips, and strategies on something that I think most people completely overlook, particularly business owners. So this is going to be a lot of fun, and I'm excited to dive in.
Well, why don't we start with, I started out by saying I think travel has gotten less reliable and more painful over the last years. I mean, I've traveled for a few decades now. What the heck is going on?
Yeah, I mean, you're definitely right about airlines, changing cost structures, and you'll even see it in how they incentivize their loyalists, right? So typically, frequent flyers, people that are on planes the most, getting their most, what we call button seat miles, would earn the most status. And now you're even seeing these airlines shift their status towards higher spenders, people that have credit cards that actually align with with that airline. And so it all just has to do with how they're really monetizing and how they're generating revenue. But beyond the scope of, how just the travel industry has shifted, especially with COVID, I can't speak much into what's going on, on deeper levels, but it's definitely changed across the board, particularly here in the States. When you do international travel, sometimes it's gotten better, but it really depends on where you're going and the type of airline or hotel brand that you're staying with.
Got it. Well, let's go there on sort of being a loyal follower of one airline or one group of airlines or one group of hotels. How should we be thinking about that? Because when I started traveling, I said, well, I'm just going to sign up for all of them and see which one I end up spending more time on. And depending on where I lived, it was one airline or another that I did most of my travel on. But how should we be thinking about our frequent flyer? Let's start with flyer status. What's the ways to think about it? How should we be optimizing it? What are your thoughts around that?
It's such a great question because there is so much value to be gained by doing this right for the right person. And that's really the first thing is understanding, are you the right person to even go for status? Does it even make sense? And there's really two main buckets of status. There's going to be hotel status and then there's airline status, right? You could do rental cars and other things too, but those are really the two big ones. And we'll start with hotel status first, because in hotel status, like almost everyone should be getting some level of high hotel status because there's so many easy, fast ways to get it. And the upgrades are consistent, they're reliable, and they're actually very meaningful in terms of the quality of experience that you're going to get from that difference. On the airline side, it gets a lot more specific to the individual. And the things that you really want to think about are, am I consistently flying on airlines that are operating the routes that I actually want? What is the path to getting status going to look like? Do I have to spend an obscene amount? Do I have to travel on a crazy amount of different segments or legs or earn or hit a certain level of miles? And then what are the benefits and payoffs actually going to be? And this is the biggest misconception, is that a lot of people will stay loyal to an airline to a fault, where they're going to overpay when they could find a cheaper route with another airline. But the key is really that the benefits aren't going to pay off because they aren't going to be getting a high enough level of status to actually have, material differences in their quality of travel experience. So most airlines, if you get like their base level, we call like silver status on a lot of them, or just their entry level status, you don't notice much. Even if you get like kind of the second tier, typically it's not until you get the third or fourth or sometimes up to the fifth tier of status that you actually start to feel, wow, I got a first class upgrade. I got some real tangible, cash saving differences. And so if you don't have a clear path to that on the airline that operates most frequently out of where you live, then I really don't recommend it, because it's not something that you're going to experience much benefit from. Instead, what you'd want to do is allocate that credit card spend towards a card that's going to earn you the best points with different banks, which we could talk about.
Yep.
And instead of trying to stay loyal to one airline, just find the most convenient and cost-effective route.
Got it. So if I'm not going to do, and actually should ask, what's the threshold of sort of travel or spend that I should be thinking about to get to second or third tier? It probably varies a little bit by airline, but pick, Delta, United, American, kind of the biggies.
Sure. It varies a lot by airline, because like American Airlines, for example, recently just changed their program where you can literally, you don't have to fly on a single flight to get their top status. You can literally spend your entire way there. If you hit $200,000 in credit card spend on one of their co-branded cards, you're going to get their top status with American, right?
Wow.
And there's lower tiers there. If you don't spend 200,000, you could spend 125,000 and get platinum, and you get a pretty quality difference in travel. Delta is shifting to a similar model. It's more spend based, right now. And then United is going to have different segments. So I would say, minimum would be around 30 to 40 flights with a specific airline in a year would be like, okay, if you're hitting around that, then it would make sense, right? And if like 2/3 of those can be nonstop routes that you want, then it would make sense. If you're connecting every time when there's an alternative airline that's just direct and you're going out of your way now to connect, I probably still wouldn't do that just because the hassle isn't worth it.
Right.
But that would be kind of a general ballpark threshold. Okay. Or if you're someone who spends like, if you're spending millions of dollars a year on cards, it might make sense just to say, hey, we're going to get this co-branded card and throw a couple $100,000 on it. And that's just going to be a fraction of what we're spending, and we'll earn other points with the rest of the spend.
Interesting. Got it. So 30 to 40 flights, 2/3 direct. Then I should be trying to focus all my efforts on one airline. If not, just go for low cost and think about a card that's co-branded to generate my status on one airline, let's say. That sound right? Okay, interesting.
It sounds about right. Yep.
Awesome. So let's talk about the top level status on some of these airlines. What happens when, and I've been like exec platinum on American when I was doing a lot of international flights, but I even think there are higher levels than that, like crazy levels of sort of access and privilege. What does that look like? Give us something juicy so we know what to look for.
Sure. Well, a lot of them at the highest levels, there's things like global services at United or concierge key with American, and things that you can only unlock when you're like, a million miler and stuff like that. You'll unlock some pretty epic benefits that are generally not available to the public. And some of them, like concierge key, you have to be invited. And so this is really going to be for people that aren't just traveling a lot, but they're also very influential executives or kind of celebrity status. Those kinds of things might get invited to concierge key. So that's going to be, again, kind of like an invite only thing. And when you get that, you're just going to get, much more consistent first class upgrades. You'll get things where like you can board way before everybody else even gets on the plane from like a back door. You'll get driven sometimes to and from the airport or across, the tarmac in a private car. Stuff like that becomes available for you. So it's definitely a worthy pursuit if you're someone that's really at that stature. But for most, it's a little bit unattainable. I would say, again, on the hotel side, you'll see some of those really amazing benefits kick in with much less effort. And that's always why I steer people there first, because you'll get to experience a much more tangible upgrade in your travel with way less effort and headache. And a lot of these million milers have been loyal to one airline for a decade to get there. So it's like, that's a long time to grind it out with one airline to start to see some of these benefits.
Yeah. Well, I'm almost 2 million with my primary airline. And honestly, it's funny you said, oh, you get all these great things. And I'd be hard pressed to tell you what I get for it. I mean, you're sort of lowest level status forever, and it doesn't matter how much you travel. That helps, but that's about it, really. There's no like greet you by name, usher you. None of that happens with 1 million+ miles. So kids, stay home. Don't go try to generate 1 million if you can avoid it.
What I've seen, Jim, on that, just to share more.
I'm waiting for them to name a plane after me. Isn't that what happened?
I heard about that. That was on CNN this morning. No, but in reality, it also just varies in the airline, right? So if you fly Emirates first class, which there's great ways to redeem your points into Emirates, and they fly mostly in and out of Dubai, but they have a few routes that are called Fifth Freedom routes, where they fly between two non-originating cities. So like they fly from New York to Athens and New York to Milan. They fly a route in South America. If you fly first class with them, the experience just from having a first class ticket, even if you've never flown the airline with them, is far beyond anything you'd experience in the States with any airline. I mean, the drive on to the tarmac with some airlines, you'll get like a massage in the lounge. There's all sorts of experiences that they put in there where it is just next level compared to anything that you'd even experience domestic, regardless of your status here. So it really varies more on the airline than it does even the status level.
I had a friend who was flying Emirates first class, and he said, well, I got on board and I signed up for my shower. I was going to take a shower. I'm like, Wayne, did you need a shower? He goes, no, but take a shower at 35,000 feet. Who doesn't want to do that? Like, come on, of course I'm going to do it.
I had that exact experience last year. I was flying from New York to Dubai, and I'd flown in from LA that morning. I had a few glasses of champagne. I'm not like a heavy drinker, but when I'm flying like that, might as well. Yeah. And I remember I woke up over London on the route to Dubai, and I was like looking at the flight attendant, and I was not feeling well. And I'm like, how far away? She's like, sir, we still have 7 hours. And I'm like, oh Lord. She's like, but your shower's ready. And I was like, you get me an espresso martini and an eggs Benedict and I'll be great, because that's what they have. Right. So, I had an espresso martini at 35,000 feet in the shower. I was like, life is ridiculous.
Yeah, so, that's right.
Yeah. And to do that one was entirely pretty much on points, whereas that's normally a $15,000 ticket. I was able to use points to get it for 136,000 points, which is a fraction of what it would normally cost. So
interesting. So
well worth it.
Let's go to hotel status and then over to cards. How should we think about getting, some level of premium status on, let's do the biggies, right? Hilton, yep. Marriott, some of the others, yeah, because those are going to be most available in the places that most business people travel. So yep. How do we get the status there? What's the easy button to get to status?
Absolutely. So so there's really 4 main brands, right? Hilton, Hyatt, Marriott, IHG. Those are going to be your 4.
Yep.
Now, for me, here's how I always break it down. If you want the best value on your points, the most consistent upgrades and benefits, Hyatt's your brand. Definitely a brand right there. Okay. And that's my favorite. If you want the best options for the most hotels, right? The biggest global footprint is always going to be with Marriott.
Yep.
And they've got a pretty good path to status too.
Yep.
And then if you want the easiest, fastest level to the highest status, but the worst point values, you go to Hilton. There's not a lot of cases where you should be going to IHG, in my opinion, comparatively, just because there's no real standout reason. But if you want to get the top status at Hilton, you can literally get one single credit card, the Hilton Aspire card. It'll get you top status with Hilton. You'll get Diamond, which
just
means
by holding the card, no spend number. Really,
it's the only major brand that I recommend where you can get the top status just from holding the card. Now it comes with an annual fee. Obviously, that fee is offset with like free nights and lots of points and upgrades and free breakfast and all that stuff. So there's a lot of benefits to it. The downside is because it's so easy to get, right? That just means it's more competitive, which means when you go to check in for an upgrade, you got 20 other Diamond members in line. Whereas if you are an ambassador at Marriott, for example, you're top of the pecking order, and that is a hard status to get.
Right.
My favorite is Hyatt, because the point values when you redeem for Hyatt are so much better. And there is a way to spend your way to top status with Hyatt as well, or do, a combination of stays and spends. So that's always my go-to brand personally. And then I have a backup status at Marriott too, in case Hyatt doesn't have as many, because they have the smallest footprint of the 3. Right. But they're opening a lot more. They just had within the last couple of years, they just basically integrated with this group called Small Luxury Hotels, or SLH. Yeah. And those are really awesome properties, particularly in Europe. If you want like a boutique experience, Hyatt has some of those too that are really amazing.
Fabulous. And if we do go to premium status on Hyatt or Marriott, let's say, what changes in our experience?
Yeah. So a few main things. Number 1, get free breakfast, wherever you're going, which is going to be great.
Yeah, it's worth something. Yep.
It's worth something. I was just down, depending on the resort, right? I was just down at the W Hotel in Punta de Mita, Mexico, near Puerto Vallarta. I mean, that's one where you go in. I had my girlfriend with me. We were there for 5 days, $60 plus tax for breakfast every day. That adds up per person, right? So it's 120. It's like several $100s, that you get off for that. Suite upgrades is going to be the biggest one.
Yep.
And so I've had some killer suite upgrades, particularly with Hyatt. I had one last year around Christmas, actually. Went to New York City. We flew in to do the whole holiday thing, and we get to the front desk and they're like, "Sir, we have an upgrade for you." And I was like, "Awesome. Tell me about it." And actually she had arrived earlier, and they were kind of giving her the spiel. And they're like, "We've upgraded you to the presidential suite." I'm like, "Whoa, pretty cool." And I was like, they were like, "Do you know how much that retails for?" I was like, "I have no clue. Tell me." $30,000 a night.
Oh my gosh.
So that was a pretty epic one. Now that's a little out of the ordinary there, but all sorts of properties where you're going to get upgrades where you book into a room. If you're at like a 5-star resort, right? Maybe it's a $500, $700 a night room, and you get bumped into a room that's like $2,000, $3,000, $4,000 a night. If you're there for multiple nights, that's going to rack up to be potentially a 5-figure saving. So that's going to be your biggest benefit. The other last piece is really going to be it compounds much faster, because when you have top status, right, you earn more points for every dollar that you spend at that stay. So it just means, more points, which means more nights, which means better status. So the flywheel gets tipped in your favor more effectively that way.
So what's the quickest way to get premier status? Is it a card? Is it nights? Is it, when should we be thinking this would be available to us?
With Hyatt or with any brand?
Do them both, Marriott and Hyatt.
Okay. Yeah. So Hilton, we already covered, right? You can get it just having the Aspire cards. That's pretty quick. Right. Yep. Yeah. Marriott, there's also the Bonvoy Brilliant card with American Express right now that gives you platinum status off the bat, which is the tier where you start to get more suite upgrades and breakfast. And so that's kind of that's always the tipping point for me. It's like, are you going to actually experience upgrades, and are you going to get free breakfast? If yes, then that's like a worthy status in my opinion. If it's not, if you're not really going to get that, right, you get gold status or silver status with a lot of these brands, and you're going to get a free water when you check in, and maybe a little early check in, late check out. It's like, you probably could have gotten that anyways.
Yeah.
So that's for Marriott. The platinum status right off the bat from holding that card is good. And then to get to titanium, which is like, to me, the attainable high level status, ambassador is very difficult to get to, because you have to spend $23,000 a year on Marriott stays, which is a lot.
Yeah.
So titanium is more attainable. You have to stay 75 nights, but with the right 2 cards, you'll get 40 nights off the bat. So you really only need to spend 35 nights in a hotel.
Yep.
That's your Marriott play. And then with Hyatt, it's 60 nights. And so the cool part is for every $10,000 you spend, you earn 5 nights. So if you spend $120,000 a year on a Hyatt co-branded card, you just got your 60 nights, you got top status there, and you're off to the races. So that's typically how I play it. I tend to do about a 50-50 balance of stays and spend on Hyatt. And then I allocate most of my spend otherwise to the bank cards, because those are going to be the most valuable points. So I always like to earn those points instead of the actual loyalty points with airlines or hotels instead, because there's a lot more utility and versatility with those points, where you can get, 5 or sometimes 10 times the value compared to what you get with just having hotel points or airline miles.
So let's move over to cards, and you've kind of dipped your toe in that water a couple of times. And I'm just keeping a little mental track. I think I'm going to need a bigger wallet based on all the cards I'm going to have to get status on all these airlines and hotels.
Sure.
And honestly, I hate carrying a lot of cards. So help us, okay, what's the ideal load of cards? Give me the bigger number, and then we'll cut it back to if you had to pick a limited number, what would that be? So what would you recommend? Go apply for these X number of cards right now, because they give you maximum bang for your buck.
Yeah, it's a great question. And it's always a little bit of a preference, right? Like, I've been in this game, and when I first heard about this, I got so excited. 22 years old, I was making like $35,000 a year, but I was taking $7,000 business class ticket flights for $6 because I was figuring this out. So I was opening every card, and I had my whole credit report mapped out, because there's all these nuances to it, right? Like, business cards don't show up on your personal credit report, so you can get more of those with less impact to your credit. That helps alleviate some of the concerns that people have around their credit score, because obviously we need that to stay solid. So when I figured that out, I started to just go bonkers with this stuff, and I was getting all sorts of bonuses, and I have over 40 credit cards now. But I don't recommend that. We have hundreds and hundreds of clients that are business owners, and for most, we hear the common theme is, how do we keep this simple?
Yeah.
And so in that case, what I always recommend is 2 to 3 personal credit cards and 2 to 3 business credit cards. So that's going to be between 4 to 6 cards. Okay. And that's going to get you generally at least top status at 1 hotel, usually a top status at an airline, depending on how frequently they're flying, if it makes sense. You'll get top status at a rental car brand like Hertz. Okay. So you got your status covered at all 3 of the major kind of potential options. And then from there, you want to maximize 2 main things. You want to maximize your everyday non-category bonuses. So let's say you run we have a lot of people that are coming in, they run like a construction business or pool supplies, random things where they're buying a lot of materials.
Right.
Those are going to be non-category bonuses, because they don't fit into, social media ads or dining or travel or shipping or cell phone services, stuff like that. So you want to have a card that's going to earn you the highest possible return on everyday spending like that. And then you want to have 1 to 2 cards that are great for specific categories. So if you do spend a lot on travel, right? In your business, maybe you're the CEO and you've got a team that's flying everywhere. You could get a card that's going to earn 5 points for every dollar you spend on airfare. That makes sense. And then you guys maybe spend a lot on social media ads and taking clients out to dinner. Okay, cool. Let's find another card that earns 4 points per dollar on those two categories. So now you've got your three main setup. You've got your travel card. You've got your everyday bonus category card, right? Your social media and dining. And then you've got your base level, like materials card, if that was your business. Then on the personal side, you'd look at.
So tell us what cards we should be looking at there, though. You're going 5X, 4X. Yeah. I'm like, okay,
sure.
You've got a card in mind when you say that. So I know this is not an advertisement. This is just your personal opinion,
Sure.
But
yeah. I'll give you an example. And I'll answer that with a little more context. The key is really having a full plan on this, because it's kind of like going to a personal trainer and being like, hey, what workout should I do? And it's like, well, do you want to lose weight, put on muscle? Like, what are you trying to do here? Same kind of thing applies. Like, are we going for, best upgrades and convenience there? Are we going for highest return? All that stuff. And obviously the things I mentioned as well. So with that in mind, there's 4 main banks that you want to be looking at: Chase, Citi, Capital One, and American Express. The reason these are the banks that you want to be getting your cards at is because these points can convert into airline and hotel loyalty points. When you do that, because of the difference in how the banks price and how the airlines and hotels price, it opens up the opportunity for what we call travel arbitrage.
Yep.
Right. So you could get a point that's worth 1 cent with American Express. If you convert it the right way, you could be getting 5 to sometimes 10 times the value on that. And I'm happy to give examples. So what that points to is starting with the right type of points first, and then you find, right, the cards that are going to maximize that. So I typically recommend Amex, Chase, and Capital One as the first ones. So a card that would earn 2x points per dollar on everything would be a card like the Capital One Venture X for business, or the Capital One Venture X personally. That's a great everyday card off the bat. Okay, so that's a really good one there. A card that would earn 5x points on flights, depending on how you're booking, would be a card like the Amex Business Platinum. Okay. And then if you were going to look for one that's great for like social media advertising, for example, and dining, that would be something like the Amex Business Gold. So those are a couple of the cards there. And then on the personal side, I mentioned the Capital One Venture X. If you were going to look at like a Chase card, there's a Chase Sapphire card that's really good. I typically recommend the preferred card over the reserve. There's kind of these cards kind of look like families, right? So there's the high end, mid tier, and kind of the basic version. The reason I like the preferred is because for most people that would probably be listening to this, they're most likely going to have other cards that come with higher end benefits already. Priority pass lounge access that gets you into 1,400 lounges worldwide, all sorts of credits and kind of space level status that you're going to get. And so at a certain point, it doesn't make sense to have all of the high annual fee cards, because you're going to be paying so much in fees. So you don't want to have too many overlapping benefits. So those would be a few that I would be looking at for starting out. And there's kind of like, it's almost like in football, how you have like an offensive coordinator that has a couple different plays in the playbook, right? We have the same kind of thing with travel. It's like, okay, we're going to run like scenario A with this kind of twist for them. This one's like scenario B. And we try to earn people a good amount of points with one main program before we diversify too much. Because you don't want to have like 50,000 points with Amex, 50,000 with Chase, 50,000 with British Airways, 50,000 with Southwest. It's harder to really have like the buying power to do much. You want to have 500,000 with Amex and then move on to your next bank, ideally.
Got it. Interesting. Okay. That makes sense. So those are the 3 that we want to think about for business. What about for personal? Same or different?
So I mentioned a couple of personal cards there, the Sapphire card,
right?
The Capital One Venture X, the Amex Gold personal card is also great.
Got it.
Those are 3 of my top cards at each of those different banks. And so for personal, I would still be sticking with the same three bank points.
Got it. Interesting. I feel like I'm gonna have to write on the card what I'm supposed to use it for, because I can never remember. I go to a gas pump and I'm like, what the heck card gives me the best return? I can't even remember. I'm gonna have to write gas, food, travel.
Here's a great bonus for you, Jim, is there's an app called Card Pointers. What it does, you basically load all the cards you got, and then whenever you're at a merchant, you can just quickly type in Exxon, and it will tell you which card that you have will get you the best bang for your buck on that type of purchase.
Say the name again. Card Pointer.
Card Pointers. Yep.
There you go, boys and girls. Card Pointer. Go download it right now. Awesome. Oh, on that note, I mean, let's go to software to manage your travel and your points. Card Pointer sounds like an interesting one to figure it out. But is there any other software or apps that you use to manage your travel life that you find profoundly useful?
Yeah, there's a couple Card Pointers. I mean, at this point, for myself and like people that know this stuff, or like when we do work with most clients, you kind of just have a plan. You just know what it is. So you don't really even need to rely on stuff for like the purchasing. But beyond that, the one that's probably the most helpful for people is going to be Award Wallet or TripIt Pro. Okay. And so TripIt is an app. There's a pro version. That's why I said TripIt Pro, because what these will do is they will sync into all of your loyalty accounts, and they'll allow you to see all your points balances in one place.
Oh,
okay.
wow.
And there's the Points Guy has an app too. A lot of people know about the Points Guy. There's one just called TPG app, and they have a similar feature. But this is super helpful because that way, if you're like, where are all these miles? Like, when do they expire? What's the deal? You don't have to log into 20 different places. You can log into one and see everything. And like Award Wallet, for example, will even give you notifications if your points are going to expire. You know, each program has a different set of rules around like how the points are going to expire. So they'll tell you if they're going to expire and then what to do to keep them active. So that's a really helpful thing that app has. So those would be the two big ones that I would recommend. TripIt also has some cool features with, like, you can see airport security wait times. You can see maps of the airport if you're trying to like figure out where your gate is and how to connect to the terminals, stuff like that. So that's a really good one as well.
Yeah, I'm a gigantic TripIt fan, but I don't use the points feature that you talked about. And I'm sitting here saying, after I get off this conversation, I'm going to have to sync it up with all of my frequent stay and frequent flyer deals.
Yeah. The last one I'll mention here, Jim, as well is Lounge Buddy. Lounge Buddy is phenomenal. And so what Lounge Buddy will do is it'll sync with your trip reservation. So based off of the cards that you hold, the airline you're flying, the class of flight that you're in, you know, if you're in first class, for example, it'll tell you which lounges you get access to on your trip and where they are and all that stuff. So that's a huge benefit because a lot of times people have more access than they realize. And so when you start to have this app, you can then see, and it'll show you, the open and close time. So you can make sure that you're going to be there when it's actually open, and the guest policies, things like that. So Lounge Buddy is one more app that I always recommend for everybody.
Awesome. That's great. So this is like a particular problem. So flying through a hub. So if United, you're flying through Chicago, or American, you're flying through Dallas, your ability to get upgrades in those cities is completely horrible, right? Because you've got people that fly their entire lives on that airline. You could be a platinum or whatever, and you're not getting an upgrade until the third day after, right? So is there a technique to improve your probability of getting upgrades when you go through, sort of high premium status density cities like that? Or are you just bamboozled and there's nothing you can do?
No, well, there is. It's just the cost is going to be your convenience.
Okay.
Because what you'd want to do is look for times and routes that are going to be less frequently flown, right? So if you have like a Monday morning route going through Dallas on your flying American, like, you got all the business travelers, you're toast, right? But if it's like maybe Tuesday, middle of the day, odds are slightly higher, or maybe even like a weekend and stuff like that. So that's something you want to consider. The other thing is you can use apps like Expert Flyer. It's a little bit more of an advanced app, and you can actually see the seat inventory on the different aircrafts and see how many seats are open in different cabins and what fare class, because each cabin has a fare class associated to it. So you can even see what's open and therefore your likelihood to get upgrades. So the real way, if you want to do it, is to have a trip booked, and then you would see, okay, is there something that's going to pop open on this other airline, and have a backup seat booked and see if you get bumped or not. And so that would be the more complicated way of doing it for most, busy business travelers. Like, you're not going to want to just play that game every time. If it's a long enough route, right? If you're going from San Fran to Miami, and it's a pretty big difference maker, then maybe you do. But honestly, I typically recommend people just book right into the first class seat if it's really important for them on those kinds of routes, because it's tougher.
Yeah, got it. Interesting. And tell us just a little bit about how your business helps people do this.
Yeah. So what we do is we really create a custom plan around maximizing everything that I've talked about, right? So there's really two main sides of the equation. There's the cards you have, and getting the right cards and the right expenses to get the highest possible return for every dollar you spend. The way to think about it here is, if a baseline return, like for us, if we were going to, if this was an investing decision, you'd be like, okay, well, what is this, fund return compared to the S&P 500? Our S&P 500 is a 2% cashback card. So how do we beat that, right? On average, we're getting around 7 to 9% back for clients on every dollar they spend. The second part is, how do we take the points and the benefits that you have and unlock the fullest potential value? So that's where we'll take these points, we'll transfer them around from the banks to the airlines in ways that is usually pretty complicated for most people. And we're able to get somewhere between, on average, around 4 to 5 cents per point, where usually people are getting 1. So I'll just give a quick example on that. When I flew back from Frankfurt one time into the States, this was last year, did the first class experience. They drive you on the tarmac with a Porsche. You get a first class lounge, which is, its own terminal. Retail ticket for this is typically around like $8,500. Okay. And so if I was going to go through Amex Travel, they give me 1 cent per point. So it'd be 850,000 points.
Right.
By converting my points to Avianca, I got it for, I think it was like 79,000.
Wow.
Right. So it was basically 10 times the value. So when you do that and you amplify the amount of points you earn, it just unlocks a multitude of difference in terms of how much you're actually receiving back in tangible cash value, particularly for big international trips or bucket listers, things like the Maldives, all that. So we help with both sides, right? We create the custom plans, and then we actually help redeem the points for the trips and map out exactly what to do, and really do it for folks in a way that makes it simple and easy. Because, as you just kind of covered, it's very easy to get lost in this and be like, which cards do I get? When do I get them? What are the benefits and the fees and all this stuff? And how do I use the points? And a lot of times, if you're a business owner, it's a little too time consuming and energy draining to figure all that out. And so that's what we help solve.
Got it. Awesome. And if people want more of you, Eli, how do they get a hold of you? What would be the best way to get in touch?
Yeah. So there's 2 main ways. Number one would be to go to my Instagram profile if you are frequently on Instagram, and that would be Eli Travel Guy. So you'll see me there. You can just shoot me a message and say, hey, I heard you on the podcast. Just say, I heard you on Lazy CEO, and we'll be able to, just shoot some messages back and forth or set up a free consult call if you're interested in hearing more. Otherwise, you can go right to the website, freedomtravelsystems.com. And there's gonna be a button right on that homepage to book a free consult. So we do complimentary consults. These are not like a hidden sales pitch. It's really going to be a value add conversation. So if that's something you're interested in taking a peek at and seeing what you're leaving on the table and what opportunities you could have to upgrade your travel experience, you can head over there and set up a call if you'd like. But the social media profile will also just, I pour a lot of value out into my social media stuff. So you can check that out for some free content too.
Awesome. Eli, thank you so much. Hopefully you helped everybody make travel just a little less terrible with these great ideas. I really appreciate your time. Thank you.
You got it, Jim. Thank you for having me on.
All righty. This podcast is brought to you by the CEO Project. At the CEO Project, we work with CEOs to help them grow their business. And our members represent billions of dollars of revenue and profit. And frankly, amongst all of us, we've probably made every mistake in the book, including some you haven't made yet. So if you want to learn from the experience of a bunch of really seasoned CEOs, we're a great place to hang out. In this podcast, what you're going to hear are some of those ideas, concepts, and things that are just going to help you on your journey. If you want to find out more, reach out to us at theceoproject.com, or you can contact me personally at jim@theceoproject.com. Happy listening.
Thanks for listening to the Lazy CEO podcast. We'll see you next time, and be sure to click subscribe to get future episodes, and check out our website, www.theceoproject.com.